Ah, the 1980s. A big milestone in advancing technology, like video game consoles and home computers. Home to the most iconic pop culture, like Star Wars and Back to the Future. With good music, movies, fashion, and arcades. But it's not the 1980s anymore. It is currently 2022, and in the last few years, there has been a resurgence of the 80s and its aesthetics. The aim of this project is to talk about our nostalgic love of the 80s and how it's impacted people in our current time, and to see if this nostalgia is a good or bad influence on us and the world around us. I have a massive love for a time period I wasn't even born in, so I figured with this project, why not look into that? This project is broken up into 3 sections, and to start us off, we must first ask the question, what is nostalgia? The word nostalgia was first coined by a Swiss physician, Johannes Hofer. It was originally a condition associated with Swiss mercenaries or veterans of war. The word Nost in nostalgia actually means homecoming, and it was primarily given as a medical diagnosis, and many people were shunned or demeaned for it. It wasn't until the 19th century that it started to take on a new meaning, the meaning we know today. And with the introduction of TV shows like Stranger Things and the remake of the It movies in 2017, it has reignited the love, interest, or past love of the 80s, the likes of which has caused a significant boost in sales of cassette and VHS players, as well as a big boost and rebirth of arcade popularity, which has led to more and more classic arcades cropping up. And thus it brings us on to our next section, R-CADE. In my search for answers, I interviewed Andrew, owner of R-CADE, located at 146 Salt Market in Glasgow, in the hopes that he could provide some answers. I asked him a couple of questions on his thoughts on nostalgia's impact on his business and his own experiences with nostalgia, and what he personally thinks of the 80s return. Hey, so I wanted to ask you a couple of questions today. So, just phrasing questions. So, what types of people regularly attend the arcade?
Our regular sort of customers are, the age range is massive. It goes from kids that have been watching retro video games on YouTube and things and looking to actually try the games and play them, through to people in their like late 40s, early 50s who've been gaming since the days of like Spectrum and Commodore and stuff. So we get all ranges of ages, which is amazing. So yeah, every single age comes in the arcade.
Do you think shows like Stranger Things are making people want to go back to arcades or experience arcades for the first time in sort of the 80s in general?
Yeah, there's. I mean, I think it started with films and TV, the whole nostalgia trip. I think a lot of the studios in America were started sort of either remaking old properties like 80s and 90s films and TV, and then stemming from that, sort of the whole gamut of nostalgia of video games and things sort of got pulled into that, and arcades and that kind of thing. So it's had a huge impact on us. And being popular, but also like just normal life. I feel like it's more accessible than ever to be a geek, and it's just accepted.
Sort of like the new wave of Duck Hunters for arcade and stuff.
Exactly. So there's remakes of old stuff, but there's also like new IPs like Stranger Things coming out and that kind of thing that play on that nostalgia vibe and that feeling. And I think for me personally, growing up with like Stephen King movies and things like that, that's one of my favorite horror genres. Like I used to watch Christine and Shining and all that kind of stuff, and that being brought into like a modern version of it is fantastic. So,
I remember seeing Misery for the first time.
Nice.
She said that was amazing.
Nice.
So you have a personal nostalgia for the 80s. So why do you think that is? Like, do you, because it's straightforward because you grew up in that thing, or do you think now it's more?
Yeah, I think I'm getting old. I was born in 1985, And so that wanting to go back to my childhood and relive all the things that I enjoyed when I was a kid, it's got this rose-tinted sort of loveliness about it that yeah, everyone I think wants to re-experience. When you get older and you become an adult and you have to do lots of adult things, life is really crap and boring, so you want something nice to go back to. So I think that's what the nostalgia pool is, because it's people wanting to relive a simpler time and relive the memories that they had growing up. So yeah.
Is that what drew you to this arcade and working here?
Yeah, so building arcades was definitely because of that. I've been collecting video games since I was 12 years old. I just stopped selling video games really more than anything. I just kept to my stuff, which is like counterintuitive. All the media advertising, like high street stores like Game and CEX, they want you to trade your stuff in to get the new stuff. But I just stopped when I was 12. I was like, right, I'm going to put this in a cupboard, I'll keep it, store it away and keep it safe. And that's how my collecting started. And I've always loved picking up stuff from my past that I maybe got rid of that I wanted to play again. So yeah, that whole nostalgia pool and wanting to go back to my childhood was the whole reason that R-CADE started. Also, it was just, I had too much stuff and no space in my house. So I was like, okay, where can I put all of this?
Yeah. Just gotta pay for it.
Exactly.
But what are your personal thoughts on the 80s as a whole? Like, kind of, like, I know you grew up in that time, but like, wanting to go back to that, because
It's a strange thing because much like playing an old video game now and comparing it to modern games is very strange. You have this memory in your head and your brain tends to soften that memory and to make it nicer and prettier and more desirable. So going back to those games now is you sometimes realize that some of those games aren't actually any good. But yeah, growing up in the 80s, it was all about 80s and 90s. I think I'm more of a 90s child than an 80s child, but I was obviously born in the 80s. And the media, that was the time when everything was changing. You were moving from 2D to 3D in terms of gaming. There was more games, more consoles, more everything. And that was sort of a big part of making me who I am. And so, yeah, it's a really important part of my life. So to celebrate that and to be able to have a business and to be able to talk to people and experience that again with them is the best thing ever.
obviously one of my questions on here is, do you own anything from the 80s and 90s?
Yeah, I own quite a lot of stuff. It's funny because when we first opened, I think I had maybe 10 consoles, and it sounds like a lot, but maybe about 300 games, and now the collection has grown to extreme numbers where we've got like over 1,500 games now. Every single classic game you could ever think of, and I never thought I would have a huge collection like this, and that's that. When I wake up in the morning, I'm like, oh, okay, cool, yay, yay.
You've got a lot of options on your break. Now to the final section, Back to the Future. I love the 80s, and I believe that this nostalgia isn't a bad thing. It was fun to hear from people who grew up in that time or enjoy things from that time. Whether new media impacts this or if it's nostalgia from our childhoods, I think the important takeaway from this is that our love of nostalgia can bring us together and let people experience something that could have been lost to time, and I think that's wonderful. I encourage everyone to go support their local arcades and retro cafes. They're doing their best to keep this part of history and pop culture alive. And I want to thank you for joining me on this nostalgia trip, and I hope to see you in another decade. Thank you and have a wonderful night.